Good morning, fathers and daughters. Welcome to Grow Dad YouTube channel. This is FRB Martin. This is another live stream. Yes, sir. Beautiful state of Colorado. We are here today to give fathers some more information through education, information, and instructions. To all my Spanish speakers, bienvenidos. Aquí, ¿cómo te sientes? Hoy, appreciate you. Okay, fathers, today's live stream is when the criminal justice system raises children. Okay, fathers, so I want to go a little bit deeper and talk about the criminal justice system when it's what happens when it raises kids, and how a lot of these kids turn out. And the reason that I think it's important, fathers, is because when a father is not a part of a daughter's life, chances are, there's a good chance, not chances are, but there's a good chance that their baby girl could end up in the criminal justice system. Because, see, fathers, our daughters need both parents in their lives. Our daughters need the guidance of their fathers. They need the safety of their fathers. So when the parents are divorced, or if the father's not in the household, our baby girls are subject to the predators and the world that is waiting for them. So when we talk about the criminal justice system, raising our children, I want to go a little bit deeper. I want to talk about foster care and how foster care fails a lot of these children. Now, in about a month or so, I'm going to be doing a live stream focusing strictly on foster care and the foster care system in the United States of America. I have a couple videos today I'm going to be sharing on foster care, but I'm going to be doing a live stream specifically addressing foster care in the United States of America. Okay, fathers, when we're talking about the criminal justice system raising our children, what am I talking about? Well, I worked in the criminal justice system for 20 years. I am a former state of Colorado juvenile probation officer. So I worked in the criminal justice system for 20 years. So I dealt with families and kids from all socioeconomic backgrounds and classes. So I have a good experience of working with families and children. And one of the things I saw when I was a state of Colorado juvenile probation officer, a lot of these baby girls, they're in crisis. And a lot of them are placed in foster care, and a lot of them may be placed in group homes. So when that happens, when the government steps in, fathers of daughters, and they take control of our baby girls, most of our baby girls are going to rebel against the system, and rightfully so, because they belong at home. Whenever a parent turns their child over to the criminal justice system, a government agency, parents, you no longer have a say with your child, because what the criminal justice system is going to make you do, fathers of daughters, parents, they're going to make you jump through all kinds of hoops to get your children back. And it's going to be very, very painful. I used to call it a lot of times a slow death of parents, because what happens is a lot of parents just give up, get frustrated, and throw in the towel. They thought by going to the criminal justice system to help them, that their kids would get better. Not at all. The criminal justice system makes your child worse. Doesn't make them better, makes them worse, right? I've always had a saying, it's better to keep a kid at home with their parents and offer interventions than to remove them from their familiar environment. Doesn't make any sense. But what happens a lot of times, fathers, when we're not in our lives of our daughters, they end up in a crisis, and the criminal justice system gets involved, because they will. Our children are done. I'm telling you, our children are done, because I saw it every day, dealt with it every day. And I myself, being the father of 4 adult daughters, 36, 30, 26, and 24, there was no damn way on God's green earth my daughters were ever going to end up in the criminal justice system or be subject to the criminal justice system, because I worked on the other side. I worked on the back end of the criminal justice system. I know what the criminal justice system does to families. Does it help families? I guess it does. Does it screw over families? Absolutely. I saw it all the time. It was difficult being a state juvenile probation officer and having to advocate for these kids, particularly when their parents were jacked up and their parents weren't involved and they ended up in foster care or in a group home. Very difficult a lot of times because so many of these kids, they've been messed over by adults time and time again. And even though they've been messed over, they still trust adults. That's because children are resilient, right? Children are unconditional by nature. They are. They trust. And that's what they do. So, fathers, I want to talk about this because I just believe when you have the breakup of the family and the father's no longer in the household, things happen. Things escalate quickly and they get out of control. I can promise you, most little girls, after a divorce, if the parents aren't getting along, most little girls are going to make their fathers pay, and they're definitely going to make their mothers pay. They're going to challenge their mothers. It's a DNA thing, fathers. I've never met a little girl that didn't challenge her mother. My daughters challenge their mother. It's a DNA thing with women. It just is. That's what it is, fathers. So, fathers, we have to be available for our baby girls, birth to 18 years of age. Because if we are not there and things happen to them, it's going to fall on us, fathers. See, the one thing we don't get to do with their mothers is if we're not a part of our baby girls' lives, birth to 18, we don't get to blame the mothers. We do not get to blame the parent that stayed, fathers. And I understand. I get a lot of pushback on this because I work with a lot of men's groups. And a lot of these fathers, they don't want to take accountability and they're not being held accountable. So therefore, they blame the mother. They bash the mothers. They talk about how the mothers ain't shit. And all these other kind of things that they're saying about the mothers, the parent that stayed. But lo and behold, so many of these fathers, they bounced. They're out of their kids' lives. They're no longer being a part of their children's lives. Then when there's a crisis, what do? They point the finger at the mother. Why? Because it's easy to do. See, when you're not a part of your child's life, you can say and do whatever the hell you want to say and do. Right? Because a lot of fathers, they don't want to take accountability. They just don't. See, it's easier to bash the moms and beat up on the mother than it is for the father to take accountability. Being the head of the house means that we have to be the head of responsibility and accountability, fathers. That's our role. If we do not bring protection and safety to our children, things are going to happen to them. That's what it is, fathers of daughters. That's what it is. Okay. So I want to get into these videos, fathers. What I need you to do, I need you to be objective. I need you to be open. I need your hearts to be right. I need you to be receptive. Being objective, a lot of times, is very difficult for most humans. Because when you're objective, you're looking for solutions. And that means a lot of times, we have to look at ourselves in the mirror. We have to understand we all have faults. We are all guilty of having faults. We are. That's what it is, fathers. Right? So instead of pointing the finger, why don't we be part of our children's lives, birth to 18 years of age? And we could prevent a lot of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you today that are in these videos. Because I'm telling you, as a criminal justice professional of 20 years, I met a handful of fathers. On one hand, I can tell you how many fathers I met when their child was in a crisis in the criminal justice system. One hand, that's 5 fingers, fathers. In almost 10 years as a state juvenile probation officer, that's how many fathers I met in court. That's how many fathers I met in my office. So what you don't get to do, you don't get to dismiss my experience professionally, and you sure as hell don't get to dismiss my experience as a father of baby girls. I got a lot of things right, fathers. I did, because I was there, birth to 18 years of age. That's where it starts, and that's where it's going to end, fathers. Okay, fathers, let's take a look at these videos. All right, this is video number 1.
No one knows exactly when the first marriage took place. People have been getting married for thousands of years. It's an ancient institution, but for some people, it's perhaps a bit too ancient.
89% of the world's population now live in countries with falling marriage rates. This is especially pronounced in the richest countries. Among the 38 OECD nations, most recorded between 7 and 10 marriages per 1,000 people in 1970. By 1995, this fell to around 5 to 7 marriages, and it continues to plummet today.
So, why is this happening, and will it spell the end of marriage as we know it?
A stable marriage has often been associated with financial stability. Married households in the US hold significantly higher wealth than cohabiting couples or singles. But despite this, the marriage rate in the US has dropped by nearly 60% since the 1970s, and the median age for first-time marriages has increased for both women and men.
For a variety of reasons, I think upper middle class Americans are just much more likely to be kind of intentional about sequencing their lives in terms of education first, work second, marriage third, and the baby carriage after all of that. So they're just in a much better spot, both financially and relationship-wise, when they go ahead and have kids.
The cost of marriage usually starts with a wedding. This is a tiny wedding cake I bought in London for $50, thankfully just within our production budget. But if you wanted the same cake, but big enough to serve 100 people, then you would have to pay at least $250. Add in the price of a venue, a tuxedo, a dress, drinks and music, and suddenly you're looking at a very large bill.
Getting married is just the tip of the iceberg. Starting a family adds all sorts of economic commitments. It typically starts with a house, followed by a car, maybe kids, which means more expenses like books, toys, and family vacations. In a nutshell, you become a fully engaged consumer in the economy. Some people choose not to go down this road, while others simply can't afford to.
From about 1980 to the present, there's been no greater increase in family instability than there has been among this working class demographic in the US, sort of in basically the second quintile of the family income distribution. I think there are a couple of big factors here in play. So one major factor, of course, is sort of the changing economy and the way in which working class men are less likely to be stably employed.
American adults from high-income groups have maintained a stable marriage rate since the 1970s. But among the middle and especially lower-income groups, marriages declined to 66% and 38% respectively by 2018. Since the 1970s, there has been a decline in the number of American men without college degrees in the US labor force. The last 50 years also saw their earnings stagnate and decrease.
By contrast, we're seeing women having a more secure footing in today's sort of more service post-industrial economy. And so we know that marriage is many things, but it's also in part a financial undertaking. And so when you have men who are losing ground financially in this working class demographic and women who are gaining ground, I think they both kind of see that the guy is less marriageable. And so they're less likely to kind of get married in the first place and more likely to get divorced in the second place.
Another phenomenon that affects marriage is the rise of secularism in modern societies. Here in the UK, for example, 1 in 3 people say they have no religion, up 25% since 2011. And this is a key reason why marriage is no longer the only basis for family formation.
In 2021, 51% of births in the UK took place outside of a marriage. 42% of children in the European Union and 40% of children in the US are also born to unmarried parents. For countries where this is acceptable socially, the decline in marriage does not necessarily spell trouble for the country's demographics. But in other parts of the world, most notably in East and South Asia, marriage and birth rates are highly correlated. Only 2.3% of babies are born outside of marriage in Japan, which means if people don't get married, they're also very unlikely to have children. This is a problem for Japan, the world's third largest economy and home to the world's oldest population.
The fall in birth rate is something that happens in many countries. Governments all over the world are worried because of economic implications.
From state-funded matchmaking apps to marriage support concierges, the Japanese government has introduced several incentives to promote marriage, but so far, nothing has worked.
There is this, financial constraint that people feel that they may not be able to support a family and raise children.
A similar problem is troubling authorities in neighboring China, which registered the fewest marriages in 2022 since public records began. The country also saw its birth rate fall to a record low the same year.
By 2050, China's working population will reduce by 10%, and not enough, babies born to fill that gap. And the, dependent population, those who reach retirement age, will double.
In a sharp reversal from its former one-child policy, the Chinese government encourages marriage and childbirth since 2016. But this time, it's Chinese women who have reservations about married life.
And the women tend to spend significantly much more time than their husband in childcare and other related care. And also the Chinese workplace is not very women-friendly. And why women don't want to get married, why women don't want to have children, is because this society is not women-friendly, the society is not child-friendly.
Men talk about the personal freedom that they get for not getting married, but at the same time, they are really worried that if they were to set up a family, they will not be able to sustain a family with the income.
The Western heart is closing in an important extent to marriage and family life. And that's going to have a huge impact, not just economically, but also obviously socially and emotionally on young adults today.
How would you describe what that moment is like when they tell you that they have?
Okay, fathers. You may be asking, why would Grow That YouTube channel be talking about marriage? Because marriage matters in the United States, I believe, in the world. And as you can see, you can look at any of the studies or any of the data that's available to you. Please do your own research. I can tell you this, when I was a state juvenile probation officer, 90 to 95% of the runaway little girls that I supervised, 90 to 95%, you heard me correctly, were runaway little girls. Their parents were divorced. Because kids pay through divorce. They do. Kids lose. When parents get divorced, kids lose. Because what happens is now you have two separate households. Dad's living in one, mother's living in the other. And if the parents are not getting along, most fathers are going to be taking care of two households. That's the way the child support system is set up in the United States. It is. It's not fair, but that's what it is. So what I'm telling you is this: marriage matters. Like I said, you can look at the data. You can look at the statistics. And they're going to support that marriage matters. When you have a mother and a father in the same house and they're rearing their children, chances of success are higher for their children. Chances of their children not having any of the issues of the world are going to be a lot lower than when parents are divorced. That's just what it is. So fathers, if you are a divorced father, it's not to say that you can't be a great father. Absolutely, you could be a great father. What's going to happen is the emphasis is going to shift. The challenges are going to become greater because you're dealing with two different households. And since kids pay in divorce, they're traveling back and forth. Most kids, when they come from a divorced household, it's 2 days here with the mom, 3 days here with the dad, then they go back. Parents never do a 7-on-7 system. Monday through Friday with each parent, a week on and a week off. That's rare because parents are divorced, they're not getting along. They're just not. There's a lot of things that are going on in these households. And trust me, when I got these baby girls on probation, and when I started keeping my own data on the runaway little girls, and when it came up to 90 to 95%, I was shocked. I remember when I used to meet with my supervisor on a monthly basis, and I was showing her, she was like, yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. So like I said to you earlier, I've only met a handful of fathers. I only met a handful of fathers in the 10 years I was a probation officer. Almost 10 years I was a probation officer. On one hand. Okay, fathers. I have 2 videos that are going to be shown back to back on the foster care system in the United States of America. Okay? So we're going to look at 2 videos back to back on foster care. Let me get them set up.
I'm unfortunately guilty of not being one of those very...
See.
How would you describe what that moment is like when they...
Okay, fathers, here's the second and third video. They'll be running back to back.
How would you describe what that moment is like when they tell you that they have to take your children away?
Time feels frozen in that moment. Everything's completely different than what it was before.
This is Alexis. 6 years ago, her children were removed from her home and placed with the other 400,000 children in the U.S. foster care system.
There are horrible things that happen to children that should never happen to anybody. And those kids need to be removed. But the majority of the time, they want to provide for their kids, but they couldn't because of the circumstances related to poverty.
This is Adrian Lewis, and he has a vision to fix America's foster care system. It begins with real-time support to families in crisis.
So I'm starting to see so many of these alerts pop up from all over the country.
Wow. Care Portal's getting over 100 requests every single day from government agencies all over this country. We have found a way to leverage technology to bring disconnected people around serving families in crisis. Just coming alongside a family with the resources you have can be the difference between a family staying together or kids having to go somewhere else.
Adrian's project is incredibly ambitious, but could an app actually be the missing ingredient in keeping these families together?
The only constant my children ever had was me, and that was taken away from them.
This is Stand Together Presents. Stories, ideas, and advice from changemakers tackling our biggest challenges.
The foster care system is the most strategic place for systemic change in our country. Why? Because 50% of the homeless, 65% of girls rescued from sex trafficking raids, and 75% of those incarcerated, they all spent time in the foster system.
Like legit, I think the problem that I hear you guys saying is when the agency enrollment happens, like you're on that page.
We have these world-class platforms like Uber and Airbnb. They have created value because they are bringing together multiple sides of the marketplace to do something together. And Care Portal is the same thing for the social sector. And one day I'm sitting in my office and the vision that God gave us was how to connect kids and families in crisis with a church in proximity that wants to help to do the very thing that is so close to his heart, to care for the most vulnerable in our midst.
Care Portal is a platform that connects social service agencies and families in crisis with mobilized faith communities, businesses, and individuals who provide relationship and resource support. Agencies upload details about a family's urgent needs, and then an alert will go out to the network in real time.
They can get a push notification or an email or a text message that says, help prevent a child from entering foster care. And you have just the opportunity to respond and say, I can help with that part. I can go meet that family. I can provide that bed. And the next thing you know, you are connected with that caseworker and that family to engage and make a difference. Before my wife and I got involved in the whole foster care system, I got to be honest, I had some pretty bad perspectives. I thought that the kids who were removed from their parents and put in the foster care system, that they were there because they had bad parents who didn't care about them. And I am so glad that I was wrong.
There's all kinds of reasons that children and families are brought to our attention.
This is Jeannie, a social worker who worked for Missouri's Children's Division for 10 years.
I would say that primarily we had a higher number of kids that came to our attention because of concerns for neglect, whether that be emotional neglect, physical neglect, medical neglect, educational neglect. It can be really frustrating to see when families are really trying their hardest but just don't have what they need to take care of their kiddos. Being in poverty and facing housing needs, that can be really isolating, and they don't have a natural support system in place.
Poverty is the thing that can keep people on the edge with no margin, right? So you're a single mom and you're doing the best that you possibly can. And the first time you break, that's when it happens.
She was 1 year old. This was over at Jennifer's house, actually. So we've got Olivia, Melanie, Lucy, and Shiloh.
And what was it like, having 4 children to take care of, but living on your own while working full time?
It felt chaotic. It felt stressful. It was kind of like just always being in like survival mode or like fight or flight mode.
On top of all this, while Alexis was at work, a friend who she trusted to watch her children also physically assaulted her daughter.
They told me that my daughter had been violently physically abused, and that the only thing that could reasonably explain her injuries was that she had suffered from blunt force trauma. And I was at home to know what happened. I think your mind goes to, how do I fix this? What do I do? And our lives were just like ripped out from underneath us immediately. Everything that we knew before was no longer. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's fine.
Alexis's case was particularly difficult to read on a piece of paper. I remember it just being heartbreaking to think about what that family had endured, what those children had gone through.
The only thing that I had any understanding of was that I needed to be separated from my children. It was actually me that reached out to them and had expressed my concerns and made it very apparent that I do my best to provide for these kids, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that they return to my care and custody.
In child welfare cases, the state makes a list of requirements to ensure a child's safety, which are uploaded to Care Portal to alert the community response teams. One of Alexis's requirements was for a mentor relationship, and the person who responded was a woman named Jennifer.
I was reading the message and I was like, this is for me. This is the one that I'm called to answer. Alexis's story is my story. The abuse, the family problems, I was like, that's what I went through. And if I could save one person from making the same mistakes that I made and help them be a better parent, I felt like that was it, that I had done exactly what I was called to do. Hey, Olivia, what's up?
I know I have someone that can help guide me through like moments of frustration or confusion or concern. She's been a great support for myself and the children. How are you?
Good. The relationships empower people in ways that they never thought that they were going to be able to be strong. And sometimes it's just giving them love and just loving somebody that hasn't felt love in a long time.
So at the end of the day, what Care Portal is really trying to accomplish is to create meaningful connections whenever possible. Because it's those meaningful connections that change the path of people's lives. And we end up being a far stronger community because of it.
With Jennifer's support, Alexis was able to get her kids back within a year.
The amount of time that it took for my children to come home was the fastest turnaround that they've ever seen.
What was it like, finally going to sleep that night, knowing that your daughters were down the hall or in the house with you, asleep next to you?
Every single one of us was just so happy to finally be reunited with one another. I wouldn't say not a single one of us got an ounce of sleep that night.
Today, Alexis and her children are moving into a permanent home. Jennifer and members of her church response team are helping to prepare that space.
I'm Team Alexis. That's what I am. I'm going to make sure she has the support and love she needs when she needs it. My relationship with Alexis, if I have it my way, will never end.
It's been 6 years since that day, and today I'm a teacher. I am a business owner. I also have the support of Jennifer and her entire family.
Care Portal is currently in 30 states and has served over 200,000 kids and their families, and projected to serve over 1 million people in the next 5 years. But Adrian is looking to expand the model outside of foster care to effectively empower more people out of poverty.
The reality is, it's not a lack of resources in our country that is creating poverty. Poverty is a trap, and every citizen has an opportunity to help other people through that trap. We could radically transform the effects of poverty in our country if we create this vast care sharing network where all these folks in the community who are doing their part to empower every human being to care for another in their moments of need.
Stand Together partners with changemakers tackling our biggest challenges. To see more stories, follow our channels. And to learn more about how you can partner with us, go to standtogether.org.
Five investigate.
Every year, Child Protective Services are alerted to more than 7 million kids with concerns of maltreatment. These reports have led to nearly 400,000 kids being removed from their homes and placed in an overburdened foster care system, most of them for preventable reasons. The foster care system impacts more than you could think. It is gut-wrenching to look into the backgrounds of our homeless neighbors, of those who are incarcerated, and of women and girls rescued from sex trafficking raids. What we see is so many of them spent time in foster care. It's all related, folks. That's why we believe that solving the foster care crisis in our nation is our best strategy for social change. It's the place where our combined efforts can have the greatest impact on our communities. And so many of you already care about these issues. Whether you're a church or a business or community leader, you would help a child if you saw them in trouble. But our most vulnerable neighbors aren't always visible. Care Portal is a care sharing technology that drives action for kids and families in crisis. It offers the connection that we need to put our individual networks and resources together and make the most vulnerable children our priority. And here's how it works. Caseworkers encounter needs of children in crisis every single day, whether they work in child welfare or education, law enforcement, or community resource centers. Once a need's identified by one of these professionals, Care Portal provides an easy way for it to go through a review and approval process within their organization. After that, Care Portal immediately makes local churches and community members aware of the need, giving them a real-time opportunity to collaborate and respond. Through Care Portal, we are closer than ever to the ones who need our help. The platform is designed to equip and empower local churches to make meaningful connections at the point of care and to allow anyone in the community to work together on any request. So whether it's one church that responds or a community of churches and businesses and individuals working together, Care Portal makes it possible for there to be more than enough care for every child through the power of care sharing in local communities.
So many of our children and families in child welfare are isolated. They don't have a support system. Care Portal can provide not only the physical needs for the children and family, but can also provide a support system and relationships.
I look at Care Portal as a platform for us to be able to do ministry across denomination lines, across racial lines, across social economic lines. And the mission field is in our backyard.
Care Portal creates generosity-forward supply chains that get the right people involved at the right time, surfacing and solving the types of immediate needs that place families at risk and making meaningful connections that can lead to life transformation. By creating radical access to immediate needs, the community is empowered to step in. Caseworkers request, people and organizations respond, neighbor by neighbor, neighbor to neighbor. We prevent the preventable. It's the power of care sharing at work. Connection changes everything, and it's closer than ever before.
Okay, fathers, 2 excellent videos. Now, when it comes to the criminal justice system raising children, as you can see, unless the father is dead, that would be the only excuse for a father not being a part of their baby girl's life, birth to 18, unless they're dead. Because what happens is when the mother takes on that role, the parent that stayed, they catch a lot of hell. And things happen. I can tell you, most of the mothers I dealt with, because their baby girls were in a crisis, they broke. They broke mentally. They broke psychologically. They broke. So then the state comes in, swoops up their kids, puts them outside the house with strangers, whether it's foster care or a group home. And then the cycle begins. Because most of these kids, if you talk to children that have been in foster care, most of them are going to tell you they've been assaulted. They're going to. So if you ever come across an adult that shares their story of being in foster care, you best believe them. Because their experiences in foster care and group homes, they're telling you the truth. That's what happened to them. And most of them, hopefully, will end up getting some type of therapy to make their lives better. It'll never remove the scars of what they went through and the abuse that they suffered at the hands of strangers. So, fathers, I'm pressing you. I am pressing you. Birth to 18 years of age, 100% on us. Whether we are married or divorced, 100% on us, fathers. You don't get to bash moms. You don't get to bash the parent that stayed. You don't. When I do a lot of these men groups and I participate in a lot of these men groups, the pushback that I get from these fathers, like I said, a lot of them don't want to take accountability for what they've done. See, this is not about blame, because once our kids are here, they're here. It's not about blame. It's about ensuring that we do what we're supposed to do as fathers of our baby girls. There's no excuses, fathers. There is none. If you are not part of your daughter's life, birth to 18, and she ends up in a crisis, 100% on you. You don't get to blame their mother. I'm not having it. I'm not. Okay, fathers. So we have 3 more videos, and we're going to be talking about the criminal justice system in these next 3 videos. Let me get them set up, fathers. Oh, I apologize, fathers. I have 1 more video on foster care. 1 more.
5 invest.
Okay, fathers, this is 1 more video on the foster care system.
VID investigates with just a horrific case of abuse that's been kept hidden for years by the state and in courts.
The abuse, all involving a single foster home in Massachusetts and at least 6 children. Reporter Kathy Kern and producer Kevin Rothstein have worked more than a year to bring this story to light. Kathy.
And Ed and Maria, we've done numerous stories about the failures of the state's foster care system. This is another disturbing case. A year and a half ago, a young man reached out to me with a horrifying story of the abuse he, his brother, and other children suffered in a state-licensed foster home.
I'm not going to call what we went through abuse. I call what we went through torture.
Years of horrific abuse inside this well-kept central Massachusetts home felt like torture to the young foster children who once lived there. What happened here was all a secret for more than a decade. The details sealed away in court documents and buried in state reports, police records, and inside the victims until now.
Everything's coming to light.
You want to talk to us about all the abuse? Get out of here! You have anything to say for yourself?
I don't know what you're talking about.
They were innocent kids.
They took everything from us.
John Williams was just 7 years old, his brother Nathan only 3, when they were placed in this licensed foster home by the Department of Social Services, now known as the Department of Children and Families. They're coming forward as adults and working with 5 investigates to expose the failures of the system that robbed them of the loving childhoods they so desperately needed.
You look back at this, how would you describe your childhood?
But I was never really a kid. I don't know what it's like to be a kid. I'll never know what it's like to be a kid.
Records we obtained show John and Nathan telling police, social workers, and others of the physical and mental abuse they suffered at the hands of their former foster mother, who was a registered nurse, and her live-in boyfriend in the early 2000s. Police reports detail the horror. The boys telling officers they were beaten while naked with a pillow over their heads to stop them from screaming. Court records show Nathan told others they were deprived of food, then force-fed, and sometimes locked in a room or put in dog crates for hours.
I'll never forget when all the times that I was hog-tied, tied up in a diaper, thrown in a dog cage. After school was punishment. Jumping jacks naked, both me and my brother together, standing with books held out. I slept on plywood. There was a bucket for me to go to the bathroom.
John and Nathan were just 2 of the 6 children placed in that foster home by the state. We've connected with them all, and as adults, they're still haunted by the abuse. Some struggle with mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and 2 have even done time behind bars.
I honestly felt like I was going to die.
Nathan Williams aged out of the foster care system, ended up homeless, and raped a teenage girl in 2013. He's 25 years old and behind bars at MCI Norfolk. He takes responsibility for his crime, but says the abuse he suffered in foster care is partially to blame.
It's hard to look at myself sometimes and know what I've done. And I'm sorry for what I've done, truly. and I try to better myself every day because of that.
He told us the trauma from what happened to him as a child destroyed him.
He would throw us outside in the middle of the winter. You know, I'd be naked, and I remember he had this big detergent bottle that he filled with water, and he put it outside with me while I'm out there shivering naked. And he'd bring me inside and put me in the tub full of ice cubes and make me sit there. And if I moved, then he'd beat me, you know. And then he'd sit there and he'd laugh as he poured the detergent bottle on my head.
Take it with a glove and rub it into Nathan's face.
In this police report, John said his foster mother's boyfriend smeared dog feces on his brother when Nathan didn't clean up after the family's dogs. Psychiatric records say Nathan was even forced to drink his own urine. The boys said they were both routinely beaten with the metal buckle of a dog leash and more.
I remember him hitting my brother so hard. My brother, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. How? My brother looked dead in the face.
They're heartless individuals. It wasn't just beating. He basically treated me like a slave.
In the end, it wasn't a teacher, police, or a social worker who stopped the abuse. It was John who, at the age of 12, got off the school bus and kept going, running away from home through the woods to a friend's house and telling all to police. That led to a dozen criminal counts of assault and child endangerment against his foster mother and her live-in boyfriend.
The children were never allowed to testify.
That's because the prosecutor spoke with the DSS attorney and the social worker and says that they would rather not have the children testify and that the children are in foster homes.
So their voices were never heard, the case never went to trial, and the couple struck this deal with the Worcester County District Attorney.
As long as they completed probation with no issues, they stayed away from the children, and that the foster mother signed over all the rights to the children, then all of these charges would be dismissed.
What's gone through my mind as I'm a young man is how disgusting this whole situation was. Sickening. It's sickening.
And even after John escaped the home and reported the abuse to police, documents show it was several months before DCF removed the remaining foster children from that home. We didn't identify the abusers at the center of this case because they were never convicted or criminally charged for most of the allegations. New at 7 tonight, the warning signs of abuse in that home that were missed or overlooked again and again. Kathy Carden, 5 Investigates.
Powerful report, Kathy. Thank you. And as Kathy said at the very beginning, this story started with a tip. If you think you have a story for 5 Investigates, call our tip line. It's 781-235-TIPS. TIPS is 8477 on the phone. So 781-285-8477. Or you can leave a message on the 5 Investigates Facebook page.
Okay, fathers. So I worked in the criminal justice system for 20 years. Former state of Colorado juvenile probation officer. And what you don't get to tell me is kids don't get screwed over in the criminal justice system. So let me get this right. Unless the father was dead, we have a child that was placed outside of the home. The state placed this child in another home with a single woman and her boyfriend. The boyfriend assaults and sexually assaults the children, not being married. This is where the state placed these children. Right. So you're not going to tell me, as a criminal justice professional of 20 years, kids don't get screwed over. You're not going to tell me that the criminal justice system raising children does not screw over children. You're not going to get to do that. Because when I do all this research, besides the professional experience that I have, you're going to come across more videos of former foster care children that are now adults that have been insulted than the good stories. Are the good stories out there? Absolutely. Far and few in between, though. far and few in between. So the research that I do for Grow That YouTube channel, I have to watch all these videos because I want to make sure when I'm presenting that I'm on point. And that you get to look, you get to check them out, and then guess what? You can do your own research because you don't have to believe what I'm telling you. You don't. But I know professionally, as a criminal justice professional, I know what I saw and I know what I dealt with in family court and juvenile court. I spent years in family court and juvenile courts, years advocating for children. And what I'm telling you is when the father's not in the life of our baby girls, our children, things happen. And they happen quick. And you don't want the government involved. Because see, this is what happens a lot of times when the government gets involved and you have caseworkers making these decisions on the best interests of the children, they place them where there's a bed. That's what happens. They place them where these children can lay their head, knowing good and damn well that the majority of these children are going to be moved in and out of foster care, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different homes. This is what it is, fathers. So I'm pressing you. You cannot have your baby girls end up in the criminal justice system. You cannot. Because the predators in the world are waiting for them if you do. Okay, fathers, these next 3 videos I'm about to show you are talking about the criminal justice system. All right, let me get them set up.
On any given night in America,
Okay, fathers, next 3 videos.
on any given night in America, nearly 50,000 youth under the age of 18 are confined in facilities away from home, 2/3 of which are in correctional-style facilities. According to the nonprofit Prison Policy Initiative, this number has decreased over the last 20 years. But the United States still incarcerates the most children in the world. Sarah Hinger is a senior staff attorney with the ACLU's Racial Justice Program.
The United States far outpaces other countries in detaining and otherwise criminalizing young people. And that has, again, similar to the adult system, a disparate impact on youth of color who are disproportionately represented in contact with the criminal justice system.
But why is that? And why are so many youths arrested in the first place? Michael Corriero is a former New York State Supreme Court justice.
At the turn of the 19th century, we created the world's first juvenile justice system. The idea behind that was that as a society, we had a moral obligation to recognize the developmental differences of children as compared to adults.
But the idea of rehabilitation through the prison system isn't working. In 2012, the Department of Justice began tracking formerly incarcerated people of all ages. The latest report, released in July, found that of individuals arrested at age 17 or younger, 71% had been rearrested within 3 years of their release. That number climbed to 80% by year 5. The impact on an adolescent's access to education is part of the issue. In 2015, the Council of State Governments found 1 in 3 incarcerated youth were either receiving or needed special education services. The report also found more than half of incarcerated youth were behind grade level in reading and math, and around 60% had repeated a grade. The educational obstacles after prison begin before the first arrest, says Hinger, when school disciplinarians initially put a child in contact with the justice system.
The school to prison pipeline refers to the process whereby school systems address young people through discipline and criminalization, and effectively place them on a pipeline to continuing and more extensive contact with the justice system.
And that can cause long-term harm.
It ends up undermining any sort of positive modeling or reinforcement. It further removes the child's attachment to school, alienating them and pushing them forward towards more negative influences.
And even if an adolescent is innocent when arrested, the length of time required to post bail could lead to a suspension or expulsion from school.
So if a young person came into the system and bail was set and they were unable to make bail for 2 weeks or so, or someone was willing to put up the, that young person's education would be disrupted to the extent that very often they were not permitted back into the very schools that they were attending while they were arrested.
Children do attend school while incarcerated, and according to a 2013 Justice Department report, inmates of any age who participate in correctional education programs have 43% lower odds of returning to prison than those who do not. But the negative effects of traveling through the justice system and falling behind in school can follow youth well beyond their release. Formerly incarcerated people are twice as likely not to have a high school diploma. Their unemployment rate, 27%. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, when children are pushed away from education and into the justice system, it leaves them unable to compete in a job market that needs skilled workers. This is especially true if the individual did not receive youthful offender status. That status, Corriero says, means they could
come out of this experience without a permanent criminal record, which is so crucial and important for young people in terms of their capacity to eventually enter into the adult world, if you will, with a clear slate in terms of opportunity.
This is what drove Judge Corriero and his colleagues to set up and preside over the Manhattan Youth Park, a court exclusively designed to deal with the cases of kids between 13 and 15 and their co-defendants, to channel youth cases to alternatives to incarceration programs.
Those who sat in that part were expected to understand the vicissitudes of adolescence, were expected to develop an interactive relationship, if you will, with the young people that appeared before. And what we tried to do was to develop a process that helped us to channel out of the system those children that we thought we could work with by linking them to alternative to incarceration programs.
The youth part eventually became a model for mobilizing social services for young people under a judge's watch, because, Corriero says,
the dominant policy behind prosecuting children should be that of rehabilitation and not a punitive one.
Young people are going through a period of cognitive development, which means not only are they likely to change and mature out of any challenging or problematic behavior, but also that as a product of where they are in life, their reasoning and decision-making skills are different, and they need different things. Youth are just not primed to respond as well to punitive consequences and punishments or negative incentives.
Instead, Hinger argues the key is to hold youth responsible for their behavior outside of the prison system if possible, to stop the negative impacts on education and recidivism before they start.
When effective interventions are made, there are dramatic reductions in negative consequences and problem behaviors.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Tim McPhillips.
Now,
Now we continue our series on the challenges facing former prisoners with Brian Stevenson, founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. Kelly Corrigan, who's host of PBS's Tell Me More, spoke to Stevenson about his life's work and what he believes Americans should be talking about around their dinner table. It's part of our special series, Searching for Justice.
Once in a generation, someone comes along and holds up a giant mirror and asks us to look at the totality of who we are as a country. That's the story of Brian Stevenson's life. A Harvard Law School superstar who spent the first 18 months after graduation sleeping on a buddy's couch so that he could represent people with no money and only the tiniest sliver of hope. 30 years later, he's still at it. Along with his colleagues at the Equal Justice Initiative, he's still taking the kinds of cases he documented so unforgettably in his 2014 best-selling memoir, Just Mercy.
I went to law school because I was concerned about inequality and injustice. And it didn't seem like those were priorities in my first year of law school. And it was really only in my second year of law school that things turned around. I drove down to Jackson, Georgia, which is where death row is. And they brought this man in and he had chains everywhere. And they unchained this man. And I got so nervous that when he walked over to me, I just said, "I'm so sorry. I'm just a law student. I don't know anything about the death penalty. I don't know anything about criminal procedure. But they sent me down here to tell you that you're not at risk of execution anytime in the next year." And I never will forget that man just slowing me down and saying, "Wait, wait, wait. Say that again." And I said, "You're not at risk of execution anytime in the next year." And he closed his eyes and he said, "Wait, wait. Say that again." And I said, "You're not at risk of execution anytime in the next year." And that's when that man grabbed my hands and he looked me dead in the eye and he said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And I couldn't believe how even in my ignorance, just being present, just showing up could make a difference in the quality of someone's life. And it taught me something really important about being present, about proximity. He started to sing. "I'm pressing on the upward way. New heights I'm gaining every day. Still praying as I'm onward bound." And then he said, "Lord, plant my feet on higher ground." And when I heard that man sing, everything changed for me. That's when I knew I wanted to help condemned people get to higher ground. And in that instant, my interest in the law was radicalized. It's so clear to me that we are all more than the worst thing we've ever done. I think if someone tells a lie, they're not just a liar. And they should not have to go through life branded only as a liar. I think if someone takes something, they're not just a thief. I think even if you kill someone, you're not just a killer. And we can't do justice until we understand the other things you are. We have a generation of kids, poor kids, that by the time they're 5 have trauma disorders. What you're trying to do with kids is you're trying to make them feel human again. But when you're told you're a prisoner, when you're told you're worthless, when you've been condemned to die in prison, you're basically being told your life has so little meaning, so little purpose, so little value. We're not going to let you have that life. And, for me, it's allowing people to be human despite the tragedy of a past crime, or despite the tragedy of the injustice, despite the tragedy of what we've done to people. And with kids, that's especially so. I never pretended to be just their lawyer. They didn't want me to be just their lawyer. And I never tried to pretend that that was my role. I'm just this professional. A lot of my young clients need me to be a brother or a dad or uncle or whatever. And I embrace that because I believe to be an effective advocate, I have to go where they are.
So tell me, you got kind of laser focused on some changes in the system on behalf of kids, and you won a huge Supreme Court case.
Yeah, I mean, after 20 years of representing people on death row, we won a case that ended the death penalty for children. Roper v. Simmons in 2005 banned the execution of children. And when we told them they weren't going to be executed, it wasn't joy. It's like, oh, I'm just going to die in prison instead. It's life without parole. It was a different kind of death sentence. And I recognized that that wasn't right either. So we quickly began thinking about, now that we've kind of eliminated that problem, how do we think about challenging life without parole for children.
And it is a death sentence.
Yeah. However harsh life without parole is for an adult, it's doubly hard for a 13-year-old or 14-year-old. That means their time of incarceration will be even longer. It's just so irrational, right? Because we don't let kids drink and we don't let kids smoke because we recognize that children are changing, they're evolving, their maturity hasn't fully arrived yet. The children I was representing, places like Florida, who had been convicted, were getting harsher sentences than adults who had committed the same crime because we were fascinated with this idea of a super predator child. And that's how we then created this legal landscape where every state in the country lowered the minimum age for trying children as adults. There are 13 states that have no minimum age for trying a child as an adult, which means that I've represented 9-year-old kids facing adult sentences, decades of adult imprisonment.
What conversations do you feel like every family in America could be having around the dinner table right now?
We've got the highest rate of incarceration in the world, and nobody seems to give any thought to that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, having 6 million people on probation and parole really paralyzes whole sectors of our community. That we have 70 million Americans that have criminal arrest histories, and that then makes it harder for them to get loans or jobs, is a real crisis.
Right.
When the Bureau of Justice said in 2001, the projection is that 1 in 3 Black male babies born is expected to go to jail or prison. That was shocking. But what was even more shocking was the absence of any reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's so difficult because we are capable of responding to a threat
Mm-hmm.
to our lives. We're in that response mode now in this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
When we go to the doctor, we don't want the doctor to just tell us about one part of the disease.
Mm-hmm.
We need to know everything.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow in the justice context, we act as if there's a limit to how much we should know or understand. And that's just not healthy. And part of the way that I think our nation will recover from our 400-year history of injustice, of racism and bigotry is if we find the courage to embrace it all, to hear it all.
So a thing that you talk about a lot is the ways that we affect one another.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that you've had a tremendous effect on me and my kids, and super grateful.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. So I appreciate that.
So much to think about, and thank you to Brian Stevenson and Kelly Corrigan.
The manosphere is falling apart.
We return now to our
Excuse me.
We return now to our ongoing coverage of America's criminal justice system, searching for justice, and the lingering consequences of being incarcerated. In some states, juveniles are automatically charged in adult court for certain serious crimes, a practice known as direct file. William Brangham reports from Pennsylvania, where there is a push to change that practice and to try to prevent children from ending up with adult records.
Mama tried to save me, but can't nobody save me, no.
Andre Sims performs under the name Day One, Not Day Two.
Think about your first day at school or your first day at work, your first day on a job. You're trying to prove yourself. You're trying to, show up in the best way possible. And so what if we could preserve that day one energy?
It's a positive message from a 26-year-old who is just now starting his life over on the outside.
At 17, I was charged with attempted murder, and I ended up spending 8 years in an adult facility, an adult prison. I was directly filed in adult court as opposed to going through family court or going through the juvenile process.
Meaning the system says this is a serious enough crime that we're going to put a young offender in with adults.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a minor, Sims was separated from adult inmates, but that meant being held in solitary confinement.
Imagine being locked in your bathroom. You know, no phone, no TV, nobody to talk to. That is your existence. You try to keep yourself busy, you try to work out, read, or do something, but a lot of the times you're in your thoughts, you're in your own head. And I experienced like very intense depression, very intense anxiety. It got to the point where, you know, I wanted to harm myself.
When youths are charged as adults and held in adult facilities, research shows they are far more likely to die from suicide and at the highest risk of being sexually abused. And when they eventually do get out, they're left with an adult record and all of the consequences that come with that.
Because you have this felony on your record now, you can't go back to certain schools. You can't go get the education to better yourself, to get the job that's going to get you the property. And so it creates this cycle, these barriers at every step. And it's not surprising that the majority of people who go through these prisons go back to crime, or go back to causing harm.
The juvenile justice system was created in the early 20th century on the understanding that kids are different than adults and they should be treated differently, and on the belief that a mistake made when you're young should not dictate the rest of your life. But in the 1980s and 90s, a spike in violent crime challenged that idea, and talk turned away from rehabilitating young people to punishing them harshly, a point infamously made by then First Lady Hillary Clinton.
They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel. And
there was a racist undertone for that sensationalized narrative about the super predator.
Malik Pickett is a staff attorney with the Juvenile Law Center in Philadelphia, a nonprofit law firm focused on the juvenile justice system.
The super predator myth posited that there was a wave of really dangerous youth that were committing really serious offenses who needs to do time for the crimes that they were committing.
In 1995, the Pennsylvania legislature passed a law that directed prosecutors to directly file charges against young people 15 and over in adult court if they committed particular violent felonies, especially if they're repeat offenders or used a deadly weapon.
Pennsylvania was not unique in this matter. There were a litany of states that were kind of enacting a lot of similar policies, but there has recently been a movement to draw back some of those policies and to recognize that youth are developmentally distinct from adults.
You're not allowed to vote until you're 18. You can't drink until you're 21, but a young person who commits crimes, they should have known better, and we're going to throw them into adult prison.
Who co-chairs the criminal
Republican State Senator Camera Bartolotta co-chairs the Criminal Justice Reform Caucus in the Pennsylvania legislature. In May, she introduced a bill that would end direct file in the state.
One of the worst things that happens when anyone has been incarcerated, especially a young person, they will face an uphill battle for years and years to come.
Ending direct file was one of more than 30 recommendations made by a bipartisan juvenile justice task force last year. One of its key findings was the large racial disparities in which youth are charged as adults. Black male youths make up 7% of the state's youth population, but account for 56% of minors convicted as adults. The task force also detailed how kids who are charged as adults are more likely to reoffend compared to those kept within the juvenile system.
We're doing the opposite of what we need to do if we want to curtail crime and address the issues of our youth. We're saying these are children. Let minors be treated by juvenile court first. And if that justice feels the need to move it up to adult court, that is their prerogative.
Despite bipartisan support, Bartolotta's bill to end direct file has not passed this legislative session. One key reason is the opposition of district attorneys like Jack Stolzheimer, a Democrat in Delaware County, which is just outside Philadelphia.
I think this is the wrong time for this
this question to even be on the table, which is why you don't see the legislature moving.
Philadelphia, in particular, has seen shootings increase by nearly 80% since 2019, including several high-profile ones involving teenagers, like the shooting in September after a high school football scrimmage that left a 14-year-old dead and 4 other teenagers wounded.
I think that there are people over the age of 15, when they're committing rape, when they're committing murder, when they're committing aggravated assault and they're doing it with a deadly weapon, I think we have to start by saying, you've now lost, you've jettisoned your ability to start in the juvenile system. Because what we're all trying to do, whether in the adult system or in the juvenile system, is figure out what's best for that child, balanced by what's best for public safety. The community has a right to be safe from that child as well.
But for youth in Pennsylvania, adult court is not just for those who have committed serious crimes. Direct file means youths are placed in the adult court system at the time of charging, when they have simply been accused of a serious crime. That's what happened to then 16-year-old David Harrington back in 2014.
Robbery had occurred in the area, and me and my friend was walking, came up 10 minutes after the robbery. Detectives, they just was stopping anyone. My friend had a firearm on him at that time.
So 16-year-old you gets arrested for a crime that you say you didn't have anything to do with.
I had no parts in it.
And how long were you locked up?
I was locked up for 8 months on State Road.
Harrington couldn't afford a bond for his $250,000 bail, so before he was even tried, he spent most of what would have been his sophomore year of high school in an adult jail. It took a judge just minutes to decertify or send his case back to the juvenile system.
The judge, he said, why is this case in my courtroom? He said, why is this boy here? Send him to the juvenile, have them deal with it.
Which is what you'd argue should have happened all along.
That should have happened the first time. I should have been able to be in the juvenile system first, fighting my case.
In fact, nearly 60% of cases in Pennsylvania where youths are charged as adults are dismissed, withdrawn, or end up in juvenile court. That's according to the state's Juvenile Justice Task Force. David Harrington was found to be delinquent or responsible in the robbery by a juvenile judge, placed on house arrest, and required to pay restitution. It took years to expunge his adult criminal arrest.
How you feel about today's session?
Today, Harrington is an organizer with the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project, or YASP, in Philadelphia. It runs art and poetry workshops for young people who are incarcerated and helps provide support for their families.
Prepare like what you would like to say or how you want to address the court.
Andre Sims is also an organizer at YASP, which is also one of several groups around the state pushing to end direct file.
There are so many barriers when you're returning from being incarcerated. I am the exception. The majority of young Black men who've been through this system are still in this system. It's a revolving door.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm William Brangham in Philadelphia.
Okay, fathers. Hold on a second. Let me get this together. I apologize. Okay, fathers. When the criminal justice system raises children, this is what it is. Fathers of daughters, prevention begins at home. You do not want your daughters, you do not want your children in the criminal justice system, because the criminal justice system is going to do what it does. Prevention begins at home. Our sense of urgency, fathers, begins at birth with our baby girls. That's where it begins, at birth. Okay, fathers, I appreciate you for being present. All fathers are always welcome, regardless of your ethnic group, background, and/or culture. I appreciate you. Okay, fathers, another live stream. Yes, sir, another live stream. It was a good one. Hope I was able to bring something to you today to help you as you further your education as fathers with the information through instruction. YouTube is a valuable source, fathers. Feel free. Always do your own research. YouTube is available and is a great resource. Okay, fathers. All right, fathers, we got another live stream coming up next week. I live stream once a week. Yes, sir. Feeling good about it. Feeling great about it. As I continue to grow that YouTube channel organically. Things are getting done, fathers. Things are getting done. Okay, mi amigos. Hasta la semana. Que viene paz. I'm out. Until next week, fathers. You know the routine. I'll holla at you. Peace.